So I was scrolling through another social media platform and I found this picture. And it's a picture of a black guy holding several shopping bags full of designer merchandise. And he's standing in a cotton field with like just a basic hoodie, I think, maybe a designer hoodie. But there was a caption that said modern day slave on the top. So I'm wondering, what does this picture have to do with slavery exactly? Like, what exactly is the reference to slavery when you see this picture? Because I don't see anything closely or like remotely related to slavery or that era or anything. As a matter of fact, I see a picture of a man who is the opposite of what a slave used to represent or does represent. I see a man who has buying power or spending power. I see a man who is privileged enough to go and splurge or indulge in purchasing like designer labels. I see someone who can come and go as they please. I see somebody that is basically free, like anyone else. He has the freedom to shop and move around freely and do what he wants to do. So I don't see the reference to slave or a slave mentality, because the mentality of a slave is far different than what black people, or the mentality of black people in 2024. So I really don't understand why black people keep invoking the name of the slaves. Like, why do we keep on comparing modern day black people to the circumstance of slavery, or the unfortunate circumstance of slavery? We have no idea what it's like to be a slave. You were not a slave before, and neither was I. Yes, that time was terrible, traumatic, and they lived under the constant fear of death. Like, any average citizen could walk up and down the street and take their life without any recourse whatsoever. There was absolutely no protections for a slave. The slaves were considered three-fifths of a human. They were lynched. They were castrated. Their limbs were cut off. They were in chains and shackles and watched 24/7 under the threat of death. Their families were ripped away from them. Their children were sold off to other enslavers. And there was absolutely nothing they could do about it. They were owned by other human beings. And that is not the circumstance that blacks live under today. But yet and still we keep referencing the slave mentality, or the modern day slave, or she's a mammy, or he's a book. And we have no idea what we're talking about. And it's so convenient how black folks mention or reference different terminologies that were used during slavery when they want to manipulate or shame someone. Like, if with interracial dating, if a black lady date outside of her race, she's a bad wench. If a black guy dates out of his race, he's a Uncle Tom. Just manipulation tactics. But you don't live like you are under the constant threat of death, or like you are a slave any other time. You don't identify with being a slave like any other time. Any other time you're trying to look like you're rich and like you got it like that. Just like with mixed race people, you call us mulattoes and privileged, and we the product of a white man's rape, just to be vicious and evil and mean, just to say something, just to be saying something. And to me, in this picture, it seems like the guy is trying extra hard not to identify with anything that has anything to do with slavery. As a matter of fact, when I look at this picture, I see somebody who's overcompensating. Someone who went overboard in an overindulgence of purchases so that he can wash the stain of poverty off of his image, so that he does not look like he's poor, and it doesn't look like he can't afford this or that. And he's overcompensating when really the bankruptcy or the deficit is not in his pockets. The deficit is in his mentality. He's void of self. He's looking for outward self-validation, like outward validation or external validation. But like, who is he seeking external validation from? Because 9 times out of 10, who gave him the most shit about being poor, about not having anything, about like who put the most pressure on him about being impoverished or being broke or not having anything? Who do you think did that? You know, like, who is he trying to impress? Like, who is he trying to prove himself to? Who is he seeking validation from? Like, who's known to be like the most flashy with the great big chunky jewelry and the great big extra watches with the big face, the extra gym shoes to make sure everyone knows that how much that they cost a lot of money? Who's always flashing wads of money around? Who always trying to be flashy and be seen all the time? Like, y'all sit back and call him a modern day slave, but really his own community is what contributed to this kind of a mentality, because it's likely he thinks like this because of the harassment he received from his own community. I remember a couple years ago I was at work, and yes, it was in a hospital setting, and I really worked my ass off at this particular job. I was a transporter, and I was on an afternoon shift at the time, and I got into an elevator with a unambiguous, like, dark-skinned black woman. She was a nurse, and she got on the elevator with me, and I only encountered this lady for like 5 minutes, if that. And I just made a comment based on like how empty the hospital was, and this was a weekday, and usually it wasn't that dead in there. Usually it would be super super busy, people walking back and forth through the hallways, trying to go up and visit, and doctors and everybody walking through the hallways. Like, it would be really crowded around this time of the day. And in particular, it was not. That day in particular, it wasn't crowded. And I mentioned that, wow, this looks like a weekend. This feels like a weekend. And she told me, girl, no, it don't. It feel like some slavery. They work you like a slave up in here, and this ain't the house. I was like, oh, okay. So you're making references because I'm very light skinned and you're dark skinned. So I guess I'm supposed to be a privileged house Negro and you're a field slave, looking like a big old fat refrigerator bitch. Like, shout out to Exoticals United. But anyway, like, girl, bye. You're a whole ass RN. You don't know anything about being a slave. Because first of all, slaves didn't get paid $45, $50 an hour to do what they do. And slaves didn't have the luxury of like pawning off their work onto their assistants, having them do things that are out of their scope of practice. But yeah, like, whatever, bitch. But anyway, like, I don't know what it is with black people, but you guys steadily, like, you keep on making all these references to slavery, like you want that shit to come back. Like, you want to be a victim so fucking bad. And you want to be a slave so goddamn bad. Like, I don't know why you all like keep making these slave references. You have no clue what it's like to be a slave. Slaves were not paid for the work they did. Slaves could not read, because if they were caught reading, they would get killed. So yes, racism exists and things like that, but this is not a picture of a modern day slave. And it's so funny how references are made to slavery, but nobody wants to have the self-respect or the dignity of a slave. Nobody wants to have the sense of community or camaraderie, or, hey, we're in this together, fighting for, the same goal of liberation, like a slave. Slaves, if they were able to see modern day black folks, they wouldn't be caught dead doing half the shit y'all be doing. Despite all of the atrociously violent things that happened to them during that time, they still kept their dignity and their self-respect. But this picture just looks like a man with horrible spending decisions. He has no financial guidance or financial literacy, and he just probably no self-control, and he's certainly looking for outside validation. Like, he has no self-love, no self-worth, no self-esteem. And so he's looking for someone else to fill that void by validating him because of what he has on. Like, literally, this is like the worship of money or the worship of material merchandise, because your whole ability to respect yourself or your validity as a person is tied up in these labels, and it's tied up in the money that you have in your pocket. Like, how many times do we hear stories about people, literally, usually it's black people, who shoot another individual over stepping on their gym shoe, or who will kill somebody else over a pair of Cartier glasses? Like, who does that the most? Who do you hear about doing those things? It's almost like these are not just items or material items to somebody. Like, my whole self-respect, my whole self-esteem is literally tied up into what I'm wearing. And you stepping on it is seriously like a serious violation and very disrespectful, to the point where I'm ready to take your life. Like, you ever hear "don't touch a black woman's hair"? Like, I remember as a kid, I would try to play with other black kids, and big emphasis on the word try, because the kids would come outside wearing the whitest of white, gleaming white shirt, gleaming white shoes, a carat diamond or better in their ears. And the little girls will come out with their hair laid to the gods, like their mother spent all morning with them little just for me perms, curling that hair, getting it just so, getting them edges laid. And you ask them, let's go play. Let's roll down a grassy hill. Nah, I can't get dirty. Let's go get a popsicle off the ice cream truck. Nah, I can't get dirty. Well, let's go climb a tree. Let's go play. Like, literally, these kids would tell you, like, no, I can't get dirty. And, like, why is that? Why can't you get dirty? Who are you trying to impress? Like, damn, where the fuck you even come outside for then? I mean, what are we supposed to do? Just stand around and look around and not do shit? I mean, we're kids. We're supposed to play. And, like, kids have been whole ass, like, robbed of their childhoods because they were scared to death to eat a popsicle, and they might get some sauce or, like, some of the juice on their shirt. Or they couldn't roll down the grass or roll around in the grass or play with a mud pie, because I did all that stuff. My mother did not care. My mother bought my stuff from Kmart, JCPenney, wherever. She didn't care if it got grass stains on it. She'll buy another one. So a lot of times, sometimes she bought my stuff from the thrift store. It's just kids' clothes, basic shorts and shirts. For her, we were going to grow out of it anyway, and clothes were meant to be worn. So my point is that people are just walking around with low self-worth, low self-esteem, um, low self, like, so yeah, low self-worth, and it's all being unchecked. Like, it's all unchecked. And there's serious mental illness in the black community that needs to be, like, addressed for real, because that's what this picture depicts. It has nothing to do with slavery, and it really is disrespectful to keep referencing that type of a mentality when you have no idea what it's like or the horrors of that time. It's almost like borderline disrespectful, but for the people that actually lived through that. This is a very privileged person who just made horrible spending choices and no financial literacy.